Good evening, everyone. Now, today our story is all about Easter time, and you're all going to get off school very soon for Easter time. But whenever I talk to my boys and girls about Easter, they usually tell me that they're getting some Easter eggs, and sometimes they're the great big ones, sometimes they're the middle-sized ones, but sometimes they're the little tiny chocolate mini eggs, which are really yummy. Sometimes they tell me about the Easter bunny, sometimes they tell me about the nice bright colours that you see at Easter time, but sometimes they also tell me about hot cross buns, which you can eat at Easter time. Now today, to help me tell the Easter story, I don't have any chocolate eggs, but I do have these. Now it's got an egg box as normal, but inside it's not chocolate eggs or normal eggs, they are lovely colourful eggs. Now usually whenever I do this story with my boys and girls in class, I let them open the eggs, but this year's a bit different and we can't do that. But this is something that you could maybe do at home to help you remember the Easter story. Now we all know that Jesus was God's son, and we all know that because he was God's son, he was able to do lots of miracles. So he was able to heal people, he was able to make them not sick anymore, he was able to help them to walk, he was able to feed 5,000 people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He was able to do all these special things, but only because he was God's son. And because he was able to do all these things, lots of people wanted to meet him. And because he was so busy meeting lots and lots of people, he decided one day he wanted to go to Jerusalem. But he didn't just want to walk in, he asked his disciples to walk into Jerusalem, to find him a donkey and to bring it out so that he could go into Jerusalem on a donkey. Now, a donkey isn't a very fancy animal. It's a bit noisy and it can sometimes be a bit smelly. And it wasn't a very important animal for Jesus to go in on, but he wanted a donkey. So the disciples did as they were asked. So they went, got him a donkey, and Jesus rode in to Jerusalem. But whenever all of the people in Jerusalem heard that Jesus was coming, they were so excited that they started shouting and cheering, and they started waving something, and this is egg number 1. They started to wave palm leaves. Now my palm leaf is very tiny, but the palm leaves that the people in Jerusalem had were absolutely massive, and they put them down on the ground so that whenever Jesus rode in the donkey, he didn't have to come in on the dirty ground. And they waved them in the air, and they were so pleased to see Jesus because they knew he was a very important person. Now the second egg is a bit of a sad egg because Jesus knew very soon all the people that were cheering for him were going to do something sad. He knew that he was going to be leaving his disciples. He knew that he was going to die. But before he left, he wanted to celebrate a meal called Passover with his disciples. And at Passover, he had some bread. And he told his disciples that very soon he was going to be leaving them. So he broke the bread, and he told them, I want you to take this and remember that my body will be broken. And he also gave them some wine to drink to help them remember that he was going to shed his blood. Now that was a bit of a sad one, and the disciples were very upset because they didn't want him to leave. Now, unfortunately, egg number 3 is also a bit of a sad egg, and it's a very heavy egg, and there's something very noisy in it because one of the disciples was called Judas, and Judas did something which really wasn't very nice. He knew Jesus was so popular that lots of people who were very important were very jealous of Jesus because they thought the people loved Jesus more than them, and they didn't think this was right, and they wanted to find Jesus and they wanted to hurt him. So Judas did something which wasn't very nice. He went and told these people where Jesus was. And for doing that, these people gave Judas some silver coins. He gave them, can we see those? He gave them 30 pieces of silver. They paid him 30 pieces of silver to tell them where Jesus was and who he was and where he was going to be, because they wanted to arrest him so he could stop doing all his miracles, because they thought if Jesus stopped doing all the miracles, all the people will love us again more. So Judas took the 30 pieces of silver and then he went back to Jesus. And Jesus was somewhere. Jesus knew that something bad was going to happen to him. So he went to a garden called Gethsemane with the other disciples and he prayed to God his Father. And the other disciples said they would never let anyone take Jesus or hurt Jesus. But they did something which was a bit sad. They all fell asleep. And whenever the soldiers came to the garden, now because it was a garden, I've got some trees and some flowers to help you remember about the garden. Whenever they came to the garden, Judas did something. He walked up to Jesus and kissed him on the cheek so that all the soldiers knew which man was Jesus. So they arrested Jesus. And next egg, they took some of this. They took some rope and they tied his hands together and they took him, and they weren't very nice to him. They hurt him and they beat him and they put a crown of thorns on his head, and it wasn't little tiny thorns, they were big thorns, and they hurt Jesus. Now the next egg was a bit sad. This is the very sad part of the story. Whenever Jesus was arrested, the man who was in charge was called Pontius Pilate. And Pontius Pilate knew that Jesus wasn't a bad man. He knew that Jesus had done lots and lots of miracles. And he knew that a few days before Palm Sunday, people were waving and cheering and throwing their palm leaves in the ground for Jesus. But Pontius Pilate didn't want to hurt Jesus, but he did something. There was another prisoner called Barabbas, and he wasn't a very nice man. And Barabbas and Jesus were both there in front of all the people in the crowds. And Pontius Pilate said, I'm going to let the people decide who to save. You can either save Barabbas or you can save Jesus. And all the people decided that they would save Barabbas and that they would kill Jesus. And that's what Pontius Pilate decided to do. So Barabbas was freed, but they decided to kill Jesus. And this next egg, egg number 6, has got a little tiny cross in it. They decided to put Jesus on a cross, and Jesus' head was at the top, his legs were at the bottom, and his arms were out to the side. And it wasn't a very nice way to die. It was very, very painful. But Jesus was on it, and he knew he hadn't done anything wrong, and his disciples knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but he knew this was what God wanted. Now the next egg has got some paper in it. If I open it up, it's a picture. Can you see what that is? It's a picture of a dice. Whenever Jesus was on the cross, they took off his clothes, and the soldiers who were at the bottom of the cross rolled the dice to decide who would get Jesus's clothes. And they knew Jesus was suffering, but the soldiers, they weren't very nice, and they took his clothes and they split them up, and they just didn't look after Jesus at all. Now the next egg. The next egg has got one of these in it. It's a nail. To hang Jesus on the cross, they put nails through the palm of his hands, through both his hands, and that was very, very painful. And Jesus was in a lot of pain, and he was very hurting. And he prayed to God when he was up there, and he knew that this was still what God wanted for him. That is how much God loved every one of us in this world. Now the next egg has got sponge in it. Whenever Jesus was on the cross, he was very thirsty, and the soldiers at the bottom of the cross, who had been rolling the dice, put a sponge onto a spear, soaked it in wine, and stretched it up to Jesus to give him something to drink. And very soon after, Jesus died. And that is the sad part of our story. But it doesn't end there, because the next egg is a little bandage. Now, you usually wear a bandage if you have hurt yourself, if you've fallen, or you've maybe got a little cut. And whenever Jesus died on the cross, the soldiers took him down, and his friends, the disciples, came with some bandages, and they wrapped his body in these bandages. And then they took his body and they put it in a tomb. Now, a tomb is like a cave, and they rolled in front of it a large stone in front of it so nobody could get in, because they knew Jesus had died. They'd wrapped his body in bandages and they had put him in this tomb so nobody could get in. So they rolled over this big stone, and they were very, very sad, because they knew Jesus had done so many good things and he'd helped so many people. But on Easter Sunday we're going to be celebrating, because this is the absolutely fabulous news. His friends went to the tomb, but whenever they got to the tomb, something very strange had happened. That big rock wasn't in front of the tomb anymore. It had been rolled away, and it's empty. The tomb was empty, just like our egg, because Jesus wasn't there anymore. Jesus had risen, which meant he had come back to life again. God's Son, he had died, but he came back to life again because he was God's Son. Now, I have to say, you all listened brilliantly, and maybe something you can do is that you could make up your own eggs, and you could have play a little game, and you could help remember all the Easter story. Now, even though there was very sad parts in the story, there is a happy ending, because Jesus is alive. He didn't die, well, he didn't stay dead, he came back to life again. And that is a really important thing that we celebrate on Easter Sunday. So I hope you have a lovely Easter. I hope you enjoy lots of Easter eggs, and particularly the little chocolate Easter ones. And I'll see you all very soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.
In my wrestling and in my doubts, in my failures, you won't walk out. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. In the silence, you won't let go. In the questions, your truth will hold. Your great love will lead me through. You are the peace in my troubled sea. Whoa, you are the peace in my troubled sea. My lighthouse, shining in the darkness, I will follow you. Oh, my lighthouse, I will trust the promise. You will carry me safe to shore. Tomorrow brings. With each morning I'll rise and sing. My God's love will lead me try.